What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to America's Finest Sports. It's Wednesday night, which means we are talking basketball. I'm actually joined by Carlos here. He doesn't have his camera on, which is totally fine. Carlos, how are you doing? Do you want to introduce yourself for the people that don't know your voice?
Yeah, man. My name is Carlos Diaz. I'm a really big Phoenix Suns fan, even though we're not really viewed as one of the nicest teams, I guess. But yeah, I just hopped on and want to talk some basketball, and I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so obviously Carlos is a big Phoenix Suns fan, so we're going to start off when we're going to be talking about the Phoenix Suns. Some later topics that we'll get into is we'll talk about some young stars and the potential and prospects of building around them. And then finally, we're going to be talking about, we did this for the NFL, or at least we attempted to do it. I think we ran out of time and didn't get to actually do it during the live stream. But a will it work and talk about, will it work this season and what teams are trying to do. And we're going to be talking about the Sixers and Portland Trailblazers with that. But, getting into it, the Phoenix Suns, the biggest thing right now is that I'm looking at with the Phoenix Suns is the timeline. Because, you have an aging Chris Paul, you have a superstar in Devin Booker. You have Mikal Bridges, locked up till 2025, 2026 season. DeAndre Ayton, you've got locked up till the 2025 2026 season, presumably. And then, but like with Chris Paul, it's kind of the big question mark. Carlos, when you're looking at this team, is the window of winning a championship, where is that? Could it be within the next 5 years, or does it have to kind of be with this Chris Paul? And like, what does the future of this team kind of look like for you?
So I definitely think that with Mikal Bridges, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and even Cam Johnson, that's actually a really solid young core in itself. And just like you said, most of them are locked up, other than Cam Johnson, who's waiting his rookie extension. But overall, one of my biggest fear factors, and honestly, if I'm being realistic with myself, I think the timeline is kind of based off of Chris Paul. I believe he's 38 years old, so he has maybe one, two maximum good seasons left in him. And for him to do that at 38, I mean, is already incredible in itself. He's showed he's can prolong his career, but overall, unless we can get a good replacement for Chris Paul by the time he leaves, yeah, the championship window that pretty much lies within Chris Paul himself. Now, as far as the window to continue to make playoffs, I think that group will do just fine. I just don't know if they're championship ready. They haven't shown me that they can take that next step. Mikal Bridges isn't an ISO player. DeAndre Ayton is still trying to figure out his own game, even though he's improved immensely, in my opinion. Cam Johnson, more of a 3-and-D type player. As far as Devin Booker, who's by far my favorite player, I think there's a lot of doubt casted on him because of Chris Paul. A lot of people think that Chris Paul is the only reason that the Suns have made it this far. And he does have a big factor, but I think Book has just as big enough a factor. I just don't know if he'll be able to do it as the only ISO scorer on this team.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because right now, like when you look at all their players, they have, I mean, you can say campaign, but they have two ISO scores right now. And it's Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and they're two of the best in the NBA. But, Chris Paul, he's, going to be 38 this year. And the problem with Chris Paul, I think, is very different than LeBron James, when he gets to that level, because it's like LeBron's been pretty healthy, right? Some guys you kind of expect to stay healthy. Chris Paul has had the injury bug, and it's typically not been, season ending or stuff like that, but it's just been out 1 to 2 weeks, out 2 weeks, out a week, out 3 games. And sometimes that's happened to the playoffs, and that's not been, I'm not trying to say this is just him on the Suns. That's been him his entire career. And you can't help injuries, but it's something where, like, okay, as he's getting older, those are just going to keep increasing. And as an OKC Thunder fan myself, I got to watch Chris Paul, and the dude is a leader, and that's something that you can't take away from him. So even if he is injured and stuff like that, I think he can still help the team. It's just something where, like, you're paying him right now, what is it, $30 million, $28 million. It looks like if he's not playing, you don't have another ISO score, and I get that, you can have the great ball movement that Phoenix really seems to have. They are the way that they play basketball. It looks beautiful. They are a fun team to watch, and that's one of the reasons why they made the NBA Finals. I think it wasn't just ISO scoring; it was everybody on this team is passing, moving, picking, and hitting their open shots. Without Chris Paul, though, how does this offense function without Chris Paul? Because we don't know the future of the point guard position. The bench is, like, looking at it, players that they have more than 2 years right now. They have Cam Payne, they have Landry Shamet, Bridges, Chris Paul, Ayton, and Booker. How
Yeah.
is this offense going to look?
So, I mean, to be honest, you kind of saw the biggest weakness within the Suns in the Dallas Mavericks series. Um, you know, who knows if it's true or not? Some people casted doubt, but it was reported that Chris Paul was again injured in that series. And there was one significant play where it blew my mind as a fan. Um, Chris Paul had like a wide. It was Game 3, I believe, at Dallas. Chris Paul had a wide open layup, and instead of taking it, for some reason he dumped it off to Aiden, who didn't expect it, and I don't even think we got the points off of that possession. Um, but knowing that, and it seemed as if the main focus was to put the pressure on Devin Booker and trust that no one else on the Suns is going to be able to create their own shot. And that's where the double teams came in, and especially in Game 7. And I mean, as you saw, no one was up to the task. So as far as how the offense will look, it's hard to say. It's hard to say because there have been times where even with Cam Payne at the point guard position, they've looked solid because Coach Monty Williams has that zero point 0.5 system where you have to make a decision within 0.5 seconds, whether to shoot, drive, or pass. You have zero point 0.5. And it's worked really well. It's a good system. But again, the system fails as soon as you give the ball to someone who can't create their own shot. And with Devin Booker being the only person to do that without Chris Paul, it's just really tough for you to go anywhere, no matter how much depth you have or anything else like that. So I think the offense, it's tough to say unless we know like who the true replacement is, because I definitely do not see Cameron Payne as the future point guard of the Suns. I don't think it's realistic. I don't think James Jones has that within his plans. But I definitely think that whoever the replacement may be needs to be a pass first type point guard at the very least. I loved Ricky Rubio during his time here before he got traded to Oklahoma. He was a great fit for Devin Booker and even the rest of the team. So I think as long as we get a traditional pass first type point guard, I think it can continue as long as we fill it with some, second unit shot creators by themselves at the very least.
Yeah, and right now it seems like the only way that they're going to be able to get that is it has to be through free agency or trade, because I mean, they don't have any other teams picks, and the way that they're set up, they should not be getting any high lottery picks by any means. They should be in the playoffs trying to contend. And so, and this whole free agency class was very underwhelming compared to recent years. But like, even looking at next, like, if as a Suns fan, Chris Paul, let's say he plays this year, the Phoenix Suns do solid, but it's just something where you can tell there's a decline. Do you try and figure out a way to move on from him and go after one of these, other free agents that are coming up next year? I'll pull up the, positions so that I can get them all right. But like right now, the top point guard that's going to be available next year, I mean, it's Westbrook and Kyrie Irving, which I don't think they fit very well. But like D'Angelo Russell, Derrick Rose, Patrick Beverly, Those are kind of the, Reggie Jackson. Those are kind of the options that it looks like may be available. Like if Chris Paul is declining, what do they do at the end of this year or even the end of next year to try and save it? Because when you have Devin Booker, in this age, you have to be going for that championship, right? You can't try and tank, and do what so many other teams have tried to do when they have these stars. They waste their youth and their prime. What do you do with Chris Paul if he's not getting them there or he gets injured again or something happens to him?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not like you just go full rebuild mode, just because Chris Paul doesn't work out. So definitely no scenario would happen like that because you still have a great young core. Um, as far as what you would do, one of my favorite things about the Suns, if you look at the current roster, if you look at the contracts based off the players, they are actually very tradable contracts. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk about this Kevin Durant mess, but that's just like a recent example. But if the Suns really wanted to have a contingency plan, they have the right contract amounts within their players to go ahead and make a trade if they need to, because they do own all of their picks for the next few seasons. So if they honestly, the only scenario that I can see them improving is by doing a big trade, no matter who it is. Because in free agency, you're not going to have the cap space. You kind of seal that off just in itself by Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Mikal Bridges. And you still have the rest of the roster to fill. So I don't think free agency is going to be an option for the Suns for the next few seasons. It's going to have to be through trade. And luckily, again, they still own all their draft picks. And there's contracts such as Jay Crowder. He's on an expiring deal. He's in an expiring deal this year. I think he's making about $9 million. Dario Saric, who's also making about $9 million, I believe.
Yeah.
Torrey Craig, $5 million. And these contracts, they add up over time, and that's kind of something that teams look for. They more look for expiring contracts so that they can just move on and get ready for free agency themselves. So yeah, any plan, it has to go through the trade market.
Yeah, I mean, the benefit is the expiring contracts, and a lot of those are expiring this year. If the Phoenix Suns are playing this year and it's not going the way that maybe you would hope, trade deadline, is there any potential for a Chris Paul trade at the trade deadline this year if just, maybe an injury has been nagging him or he just isn't the same guy? Or do you have to stick it out with him this year? Because, if you want to get a superstar player to pair with Devin Booker, Chris Paul probably would have to be on the way out, just because of getting the money to work. But is there any possibility of a Chris Paul trade this year? I don't think it's likely by any means, but what do you think about potentially moving on from him mid-season if the season's not going to the level that you're hoping for?
Yeah, I don't think that a Chris Paul trade would happen. I think Chris Paul has huge ties with just management between Monty and James Jones. So I don't really foresee them trading him, even if, for some reason there's injuries or he's just having a bad year. I honestly don't know if there would be much interest in him, even if it's for a superstar, like to trade a 38. And by the time that trade deadline comes around, he'll be on the way to 39 years old. I don't think many teams would want that in return for a superstar, even if it makes the salary work. I will say that the one thing about Chris Paul's contract is that I believe the first 2 years of his deal were guaranteed, and then the third year, I believe it was half guaranteed, and then the fourth year, I don't know if it was guaranteed at all, but it was only due to his age and the restrictions within the Players Association. But regardless, no, I don't think there would be a trade, and I think they would just kind of have to ride it out. I just think that Chris is going to ride it out with the Suns, not just because of the loyalty, but I just don't think there will be many teams interested in that contract and his features.
I think that's definitely fair. I think the Phoenix Suns are going to be a contender again this year. It just like the health of Chris Paul is always the question when it comes to Chris Paul teams in the playoffs. If he's healthy, this offense should work. This team should work. The biggest question, the biggest ability is availability, and that's been his downfall in his career. It's not been he hasn't played well in the playoffs. It's he hasn't played in the playoffs a lot of times. And they faced a difficult team in Milwaukee and were unable to get the win, but they got there. They showed that this core was able to get there, and Cam Johnson is a much better player than he was, in that season. And Devin Booker, I think, has improved as well. Mikal Bridges is a lot better than he was, 2 years ago. So it's going to be really interesting to see this season. But, let's kind of get into an interesting kind of topic, because basically the general idea of this is there's so many superstars in the NBA, and so many guys get these supermax contracts. And it feels like a supermax should only go to a guy that you're really trying to win a championship around, right? All the best teams, they have their cornerstone, right? The Bucks have Giannis. Obviously, you would build around Giannis. The Golden State Warriors have Steph Curry. Obviously, you would build around Steph Curry. But I've got some kind of young stars that, may not have gotten their full chance, they may be a little bit young. But let's talk about a couple of players, and I'll bring them up, as we go, about whether or not you would want them as your cornerstone key piece in building a championship team. Now, this could be a championship team this year, or it could be giving them, a 5-year deal to your team to be the guy. All these guys, I think, would be valuable on a team that's contending if they were a number 2. But could they be a number 1, at some point in their career that you would want to build around? Because I feel like there's too many guys that, I'm sorry to Bradley Beal. I love his loyalty. I really respect his loyalty, but he's not going to be the number 1 on a championship team. He could be a great 2, but you don't want to build around him if you're trying to win the championship. Now, if you're wanting to just, compete, you can build around Beal. But let's start off with Mr. Zion Williamson, because Zion, obviously, number 1 overall pick, freak athlete, dominant rookie season when he played. Is he a guy that you would want to build around? Taking into concern the injury history, the weight problems. What do you think about him as your cornerstone piece of a franchise?
To be honest, there is a lot of question on Zion because of what you said, right? The injuries and, the media coming out with weight problems and stuff like that. And it's kind of like an uncertainty, but I love Zion, and I don't even think the weight standards are really an issue. I read something on the media that came out just a few weeks ago about how there's a weight clause, within his contract, but continuing to read a little bit more, I was reading that weight clauses are something that's standard in almost every single contract, so that seems like something that the media was trying to just, scoop and, get a story out of, which is unfortunate. But you've seen him at Duke, and when he was healthy, you've seen that potential in him, like he's a beast from what I've seen. But it goes very well into what I said earlier. There is an uncertainty of, his health. And I know it's only been like 1 injury so far, and, just trying to rehab and get back from that. I do expect a bounce back season from him. Would I have him as my cornerstone? I don't think so. I don't think I would have him as my cornerstone. I just don't feel that confident in that I would want to build around him for the next 5 years, and that's just me today. He could at the end of the season just show exactly what I was expecting, which is he's going to have a bounce back year and just prove like he belongs here. He could do that, but right now I don't know. There's uncertainty. So yeah, I wouldn't put him as my cornerstone right now. Maybe down the line when he proves it, but just not right now.
Yeah, I think he's probably the most interesting guy that I'm going to bring to the table because like the talent is so visible. Like when he's on the court, he's arguably the best player on the court no matter who he's against. Like even when he's going up against Giannis, it seems like he's a mismatch. And not the other way around, which is absurd to say. Like he just goes in, does whatever he wants, jumps higher than anyone, and lays it in or dunks it, and just does everything that you could ask from him. And I know he doesn't shoot the three ball really well. He doesn't, create his shot from the outside, but get him the ball in the paint, and the dude's a bucket, which is extremely rare nowadays. Like even Embiid, who in my opinion, I think Embiid's the best, center in the NBA. Obviously, Jokic, him 1 and 2. If you say Jokic, I'm totally fine with that. But Embiid is like, okay, you give it to him high post, at the elbow. A lot of times you give him at the 3-point line, and then he'll back you all the way in. Zion is like, okay, let me just post up, and I will be in the paint, catch it, jump up, turn around, and just finger roll it over everyone else, which is you don't see. Giannis catches the ball outside the paint, hits that patented spin move, and then I don't even know what to call it, the Michael Jordan Space Jam reach dunk over everyone else. Rooting against Giannis is very frustrating. It must have been super hard in the NBA Finals because he just does things it's like you can't do. But Zion, like, give it to him in the paint, and he's a bully. He's one of the few bullies left in the NBA that can actually back it up. Because we got guys like Markieff Morris, but he's kind of trash. But like for me, I feel like I would because I don't know, hope. I think that's the only reason. Like it's like I hope he turns out because it's such a wild card right now. He's so physically dominant. I think he plays the right position. He can defend. He has the body to defend. But I'm not concerned about the weight. The dude can jump no matter what. The dude can move no matter what. My concern is the injury history. And a lot of people say, oh, it's the weight. That's why he's getting injured. I don't think so. It's been things where it's like, oh, he landed wrong. Being overweight or not, if you land with a twisted ankle, you have a good chance of getting hurt. It's not like he's going up and, he's getting some Kevin Ware injury where he just like his body weight just, explodes his leg or something like that. It's like, no, he's still jumping 40 plus inches off the ground. He's just, for some reason, that big body is just a little bit fragile. But I mean, if you get a season of him healthy when you're building around him, you're a true contender. And I say that, thinking like 3 years in the future because we haven't seen Zion play in like almost 2 years. It's been a year and a half or something like that. But I feel like I would build around him, but like it would be if I'm a general manager, I would be thinking very long and hard about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And honestly, those Pelicans, I think that's going to be an actually fun team, but also a scary team. I don't think they're a playing team. I think they're a playoff team. We've seen what they did just towards the end of the season. They traded for CJ McCollum, but you add Zion to that mix, and I think that's a very scary group. I love Zion, and he's a freak athlete, just as you mentioned earlier. And you're right, he is like a bully. And I would love to have him on my team, and anyone would love to have him on their team. I think, again, just for me, it's just I want my confidence level to be a little bit more until I'm like, this is the guy I want to build around for sure for the next 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very valid concern. A lot of GMs, I think, would have your side on that. But let's get into the next player. This is an interesting one. A guy that was just in the NBA Finals, but as the number 2, Jaylen Brown. Because, I thought of him because he gets thrown around in the Kevin Durant, or was getting thrown around in the Kevin Durant trade, to Boston. It was like, oh, they would give up Jaylen Brown. And it's like, okay. do you want Jaylen Brown as your guy? Because I think he can very well be a 2. I think he would easily be a 2, and he can, win a championship as a 2. Could he, in the next 5 years, be a 1? Because there's many times watching the Celtics where it doesn't look like Jason Tatum's team, and it looks like it's Jaylen Brown's team because he just takes over in a lot of games. And I think even though they made it to the finals, I still think he's wildly underrated because he was a major contributing factor. Like, that whole team was, but I feel like he was the unsung hero because everyone talks about Al Horford. Everyone talks about, Grant Williams. People don't bring up Jaylen Brown. Would you build around him? Would you ever let him be your cornerstone? Like, if you're making a trade to them and you're trading a superstar that's aging or something like that, or you're trading a first-round pick, are you taking on him for the next 5 years to try and win a championship?
Yeah, I mean, I love Jaylen Brown, to be honest. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the NBA, and I think he is overshadowed by Jason Tatum. You were talking about the NBA Finals and how he was one of the unsung heroes. And yeah, I mean, that to me, that was clear as day. There was a lot of Jason Tatum struggles, and I don't know if that's because, the main focus of the defense was to contain Jason Tatum, which ultimately gave less attention to Jaylen Brown. But regardless, Jaylen Brown did step up as much as he could. And there has been a lot of moments. You see, that's the difficult thing between Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. A lot of people for sure see Jason Tatum as the more valuable player. But throughout the regular season and even in the playoffs, there have been many instances where it was like one or the other, not both at the same time. So that's always been the tricky part. Now, as far as would I build around him as my key cornerstone for the next 5 years? Man, I think I actually, if you build correctly around him, I could see it. I could definitely see him as a cornerstone or even a number 1 option. Um, and to be honest, no matter who's your cornerstone, you have to build right around them.
Yeah.
But I think he has the isolation scoring you would want. And to me, in a superstar, that's like the most important feature, in my personal opinion. You have to create your own shot when nothing else is working. And I think Jaylen Brown can definitely do that. He's gone off for those 40-point games and stuff like that. So I have the confidence that he's someone I would want as my key cornerstone. He can create a shot. He's a good defender for the most part. And I love what he brings to the table overall. And he's still a young player. And he's still got plenty of time to blossom. That's the thing about these players is they still have plenty of time to actually enter the prime. Most of these guys haven't even hit nowhere near their prime. But a lot of what NBA fans want, a lot of NBA fans want a player like Luka Doncic who just immediately came in and just immediately dominated. And that's just kind of, it's not really realistic. I see Luka as a unicorn, to be honest, a LeBron James. It's just those players are once in a generation. So I think there's still plenty of room to grow, and I would not mind at all to build around Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, I love the point that you make about wanting that kind of instant satisfaction. But you look at the best players in the NBA, and they didn't come in and everyone was like, oh, they're a top 10 player, right? Jokic has won back-to-back MVPs. Did he come in and dominate the league? No. Giannis won back-to-back MVPs and a Defensive Player of the Year and a Finals MVP. Did he come in and dominate? No. Steph Curry just won Finals MVP. Did he come in and, everyone's like, oh, he's a top 10 player? No. They all took time to develop. And no, Jaylen Brown is not at that level currently, but he does have, the scoring potential, which I like how you also brought up, being able to score in isolation is huge for a superstar because no matter how good you are, right? I'll say Rudy Gobert as an extreme example gets I think he's on a max contract. He's getting a lot of money right now. And yes, he's a great defender. Yes, he's a great rebounder. Yes, he's great in the pick and roll game. But you cannot give it to him on the block. You cannot give it to him at the elbow. You cannot give it to him to try and score a basket. That is putting your team at a disadvantage when you are paying a large portion of your money on the offensive side of the ball and you're trying to score in game 4, game 7 of the NBA Finals, and you're going up against a defensive player of the year and they're locking up maybe your number 2. If you can't put the ball in the basket, you won't be able to win. Jaylen Brown can at least put the ball in the basket. That's been something throughout his career that he's always been able to do. He's shot, about 47% or above his entire career. Came in shooting 48%, shot 46.6. That was his worst year in 2018, which is still really good as a volume scorer. But he's averaging, he just keeps going up in the average points per game. He's up to 23 now. I feel like if he was running his own system, running his own scheme, like he's a guy that you could be seeing average 28, 29 points per game. He could be that guy. But as far as like building a championship, personally, I don't think I would, because I just don't know if I feel like he would get into like that just under tier. I feel like he could get to the, sorry Blazers fans, we're going to talk about you later, the Damian Lillard tiers where like he's leading a team and it's very clear that he's very good, but it's also, you're like, I don't know if he would be able to win, right? I think he could definitely lead a team to the playoffs. He may be able to win a series, but him going head to head, when you go into these NBA playoff series, many times it's the best player wins the series because it comes down to that isolation. In the Eastern Conference, in the Western Conference, do I see him going head-to-head against a Luka over the next 5 years, or a Devin Booker, or a Steph Curry, and being able to come on top? I just don't see it right now. I do like Jaylen Brown. I love his game. I think he's super underrated, but personally, I don't see it happening. I don't think he would be a guy that I would want to build around.
Yeah, and I think that's very fair, and it's easily, you have a complete argument on your side for sure. And for me, I mean, I could completely be on that side too. I think maybe for me it's just I'm a little more high on Jaylen Brown than a little more people for sure. But yeah, just as he mentioned, he definitely could be a 28, 29 points per game scorer, especially in today's era, with how much we're scoring nowadays. But if you give him the ball as the number one option, sure, there's going to be more focus, but I think he's more than proven that he can take on, most of the defenders in the league, by himself. So, yeah, I agree with you. Or, sorry, I agree with your side, but I'd also stick with mine if that makes sense.
No, yeah, you see the argument,
Yeah.
but you just lean the other way. That's totally fair. Next, we're going to move into 2 point guards. And I think point guard is the toughest position, in my personal opinion, to build around. You look at the history of basketball, I would say there's been 3 point guards that have ever led their team to championships as the guy, right? Steph, Magic, Isaiah. But at the same time, point guards may be the most fun to watch position in the NBA, right? You've got, and I don't consider Luka a point guard. I think of him more as a point forward, with the size that he has. But, I mean, Dame's ton of fun to watch. Westbrook in his prime, ton of fun to watch. The 2 guys that I'm going to bring up, ton of fun to watch. Derrick Rose was a ton of fun to watch. But let's start off with Ja Morant, who definitely took a leap last season. Came out, led the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, that team was just tenacious, I feel like is the best way to describe them. They just came after you no matter what you did. They just kept on coming. Is Ja Morant, over the next 5 years, because obviously he's still developing, he's still super young, is he a guy that you would want to build around as your number 1? Because I think it's hands down, like, imagine if you paired him with a guy like a Kevin Durant or something like that. I mean, as a number 2, we would it would be a super team if he was a number 2. But if he's the number 1, would you be able to win a championship with him as your number 1?
Man, John Morant is pretty much one. No, I don't think one of. I think Ja Morant is the best finisher in the NBA today. I mean, especially at the point guard position.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, there's only been three point guards you can really think of who teams were built around where they were actually championship teams: Steph Curry, Magic Johnson, Isaiah Thomas. Now, you look at point guards like Steve Nash or Chris Paul, and they're again more traditional, but unfortunately have no championships. And that's kind of how most point guards are. But I don't consider John Morant as the prototypical normal point guard.
Yeah.
I think he's definitely developed his passing from last season to this season. That's one of the things I noticed about him. He was definitely a better passer and a ball handler. And obviously, he can drive. He can take it to the rim anytime he wants. But his problem right now is obviously the outside shots. And it feels like in today's league, it's almost as if that's one of the more necessary parts. It's not like he was a horrible, 3-point shooter or anything. If he has a good look, he'll take it. And I don't know what his percentage was at the top of my head, but
It was 34.
Yeah, which is like a little below average, especially in today. But like I just remember watching him against the Warriors, and he took that team, to the very end of just a lot of those games. He did as much as he could. But I just remember watching Draymond guard him specifically, and it's like he left the most room out there on the outside. And if I'm being honest, I think the only reason Grizzlies, continue to stay within the Warriors was because John Morant would occasionally hit those threes, but it felt like they were giving him a lot of threes. And it's because they knew that wasn't his game. He's a driver. And so if you're a driver, I mean, it's a little more predictable. It's not like he has a mid-range shot like Devin Booker, for example. So would I build around him? No. Just because even though he's not the prototypical point guard, as I mentioned earlier, like Steve Nash or Chris Paul, to me, I need to see more, again, shot creation. You can be the best driver in the world, but as the Warriors and Draymond Green showed, it can be something that you can game plan around, and yeah, I mean, the Grizzlies are a completely different team with and without John Morant, which is, I think, why the Grizzlies blew the Warriors out by 50 points when Ja was out.
Yeah.
It's like almost two complete systems. So in summary, no, I don't think I'd build around him. Not until I can see that this is a guy who can be an ultimate scorer in all three areas.
Yeah, for me, I really like. I gotta say, I'm not a huge Memphis Grizzlies fan. Too many battles for OKC back in the playoffs with KD and stuff. But I do really like watching John Morant play. I loved watching him at Murray State. I loved watching him his rookie year. Something about him, the injury concern with him is he doesn't play every game. He played 67 his rookie year, 63 last year, or I guess 2 years ago, and then 57 this past season. And I'm more worried about his health than, a guy like Zion's. Even though Zion has missed more time, Zion has size to his advantage. He's not going to get bruised playing against people. And John Morant is a skinny framed player. Now, that allows him to, get really skinny, slide through holes, hit difficult shots. But with him, I feel like so much of his ability is based on his athleticism. The way he finishes around the rim, it's because he, one, either has too much hang time for the defender, or two, he's able to just get a little bit higher than that defender and, finish a little bit over him. And the difference between him and Zion is about 4 inches. And I don't know, probably 100 pounds now. In reality, more like 80, 70 pounds. I'm worried about the longevity of him. I think it'll take 4 or 5 years if he's able to develop his game to become that. But for me, I feel like as a guard, if you're going to be the number one, I feel like you cannot rely on athleticism like that unless you are on another level than human beings. And when I say that, I mean Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's like the only guy where I would be like, okay. you're all right because Giannis is so much longer and lankier, and yet still at the same time just as strong, if not as strong as anybody he goes against, and so that allows him to get these angles. John Morant's never going to have that ability because he's 6'3", 190 pounds. I feel like if he wants to be that guy, I think he needs to step up in the Steph Curry element of offense, the Kyrie Irving style of offense. Now, he can still be the athletic guard that dunks on people, but he's got to be able to pull out and not have to score based on athleticism. Because I feel like when I watch him right now, it's all based on that speed, and it's all based on that, that vertical and that burst. And that's a great starting point. I think he needs to keep developing it. But for me, like I said before, the way the point guard position is played, the way the point guard position has traditionally been played, you have to be so good. Like top 5 point guard of all time good to even have a chance. At winning that championship as a number one. And then the other guys that are top 5 all time at the point guard, they don't have championships. Like it's Magic and Steph are 1 and 2. And then a lot of people put IT 3. I put IT in the top 5, but sometimes I throw Steve Nash in there, Jason Kidd, Oscar Robertson. Those are all guys that get thrown around, but none of them were a 1 on a championship team. They always had that other guy. Oscar could pass it in. I believe he won a championship with Kareem. Being able to pass it into Kareem is a major benefit because he's the 2. John Morant would be an absolute... He would maybe be the best number 2 possible for any, superstar. Not getting another cornerstone build-around piece. Like getting a Kevin Durant, or looking towards the future, getting a Luka with a John Morant, or getting a, Devin Booker with a John Morant, that would be unbelievable because as a number 2, I feel like he'd be perfect. I don't see him as a number 1, which isn't I feel like so many people, they take that as like me trying to be mean to a player, but I feel like it's me, like it's still praising them. To be like, this guy is a number 2 option would be unbelievable. That's not me trying to disrespect them. That's me trying to be real, because there's only ever about 5 guys in the NBA that can win a championship as the number 1.
Yeah. And the problem with, NBA fans and media, or sorry, no, just NBA fans, when it comes to the media, if you're not praising someone, you're disrespecting them. Even if you don't mention someone, you're disrespecting them. It's so weird how, the fans, we, value and compare these players against one another. It's just very different from before. It's like either they're the best or they're the worst when it comes to your opinions. You could, as you said, you could still praise someone and talk about how great of a player with your own opinions of your own criticism for that player. So, yeah, no, it's definitely not any disrespect towards Ja. You mentioned it. His athleticism is very dependent on how he builds his game around. And I think he's better than what Derrick Rose was in his prime. But, again, he just, I don't know if he needs to be exactly Steph Curry, but if he could at the very least just create his own shot, even in the mid range, as long as he can create his shot somehow, then he could definitely take to whatever team, the Grizzlies to a championship. But right now, as just a athletic finisher, I don't think that's going to take you anywhere, especially as a point guard, 6'3", 190.
Yeah, so let's get into the final player, another point guard, a 23-year-old point guard, which I think a lot of people forget that he's 23, which is the same age as John Morant. Now he's almost 24, so he's just about a year older than John Morant. Trae Young. Trae Young's super intriguing to me because crazy good shooter, great passer, but he's a bit careless. Maybe the worst defender in the NBA outside of Isaiah Thomas when he's on a roster. But he's shown that in the big moments do not get to him, which I think is something that really goes undervalued because in the playoffs, last season was a horrible matchup. Like the Miami Heat, when you are the only player on your team that can score and make a shot, and you have to go up against that Miami Heat defense, it's not going to go good for you. I don't care if you're Steph Curry. I don't care if you're Giannis Antetokounmpo. They've got too many defenders to be able to just get by them with one guy. And that's what the Hawks had to try to do. It wasn't going to work. It had no chance. But the year before that, averaged 28.8 points in the playoffs, and just absolutely carried that team. I mean, was even winning games against the Bucks before he got injured. Like, he has shown in the playoffs, like, when he has a team around him, because right now the team's kind of wonky. They keep swapping guys in and out. John Collins is inconsistent. Clint Capella, you never know if he's going to play. And then Kevin Huerter, inconsistent shooter. Bogdanovich, kind of weird acquisition off the bench. At first I loved it. Then I was like, I don't know. Do you think Trae Young, next 5 years, as he develops, can he get into that Steph Curry type mold where it's, he's a passer, but he can also create his shot no matter what. And if he gets the right, shooter, great. Because Steph Curry, at Trae Young's age, was also an atrocious defender. If he gets that Klay Thompson, if he goes purely into the Warriors mold, right? Great defender, in the small forward, power forward slot, and then a great, 3-and-D player at the 2. Could Trae Young be the guy? Or is that just too much wishful thinking to hope that he would be able to get it done?
No, I 100% easily, in my opinion, I would take Trae Young and I would build around him as my number one. As a point guard, he's shown, obviously, he can pass. I mean, he's averaged, I think, around like 9-10 assists, on average.
His career is 9.1.
Yep. So excellent passer. I mean, even some of the passes he's given to like John Collins or Clint Capella, when I watch his games, especially in the playoffs, it was kind of like, did he really just make that pass? But other than that, it's something we've already discussed. His shooting, he can shoot deep, he can shoot mid, he can drive, he's got the floater. He has one of the best shooting games out of a lot of play. Like he's probably like in the maybe like top 5, top 10 probably of creating his own shot. And you're right. The defense is absolutely horrific. But again, he's just another player where it's like he's not even his prime. He's constantly compared with Luka because of that Luka trade, right? But to even have discussions about who won the trade kind of has its own significance. Obviously, no one wants to be compared to someone for the rest of their career, but that's just kind of what's going to happen with Trae. And I know he's accepted that, but I view him as someone who you give him a few more years and maybe he's, the defense, he can be at least an average defender. But it's pretty much what you said. You give him the right core around him. It's like, yes, that is your guy. If you need a bucket, it's clutch time. You need someone, he's the guy to go to. And he can do it. Floater, outside shot, mid-range, it doesn't matter. Like, you've seen it. There's the footage to show he's actually done it in those moments. So, yeah, I feel really confident. I love Trae Young's game. You just got to give him the right people. Right now, he doesn't have the right people.
It's kind of ironic. We're talking about Trae Young. Same time earlier tonight, we were talking about Devin Booker and the Phoenix Suns. And why were they able to get stopped when Chris Paul was struggling? Because he was the only guy that could make a bucket on his own. That's been Trae Young. If he gets another guy next to him that teams are worried about, like I feel like the guy next to him has been Danilo Gallinari. Like that's been the guy that you have to go to get a bucket outside of Trae Young, which is not the guy you want to be giving it, off the bench, as a fourth scorer. Great player, but you can't rely on him to be your, number. Maybe it's Bogdan, but I feel like Bogdan's more of a, he's more of a shooter. Now, can he score? Yes, but I feel like if you're a defender, you're not afraid of a Bogdan isolation. if he gets the right guys around him, I feel more confident than with any other point guards. Again, I don't consider Luka a point guard in the NBA. Outside of obviously Steph Curry, to try to be able to win that championship, because I think Dame's a little bit too old. Chris Paul, I think, is a little bit too old. Trae Young is just getting into that prime age. He's really getting an understanding of the NBA. If he had the right coaching and if he had the right team around him, great free throw shooter, gets to the line as well as anybody in the league, he could absolutely win a championship because he plays the right way as the one. I'm not saying he's better than other players, but you have to be able to create your own shot, and you have to be able to hit the mid-range. You have to be able to hit the three, and you have to be able to score in the paint. And he does all of those very well, and he also draws fouls a ton. So I definitely think Trae Young's a guy that you can look at to build around for a championship, because he's shown that he can do it. Like, watching him in, what was it, 2020, or was it I think it's 2021. I think it was very clear that you could build around him. I think, were they 2-2 against the Bucks?
Yes, it was 2-2.
And then he gets hurt. And then it was like, oh, the Hawks look really bad. It was like, yeah, because Trae Young put the team on his back, like excessively put the team on his back. But let's kind of switch over to the final kind of topic. We'll see how much time we can get this into. Let's talk about two teams, because I was looking at it and I was like, will it work? The idea is teams that made big offseason moves, will it work out for them? Will they be able to win that championship? Let's start off with the Philadelphia 76ers, because they have Embiid. They got Harden to restructure. It seems like they're trying to win. They also brought in PJ Tucker. What do you think about this team? Like, does this team work? Or is it still just, okay, James Harden's not the same guy that he once was, and Embiid still needs that true number two?
Yeah, so I think that in terms of, is it going to work for the 76ers? I think it can, to be honest. I don't think you have to rely on Harden to be Houston James Harden. I think that standard has been held to him, because when he was in Houston, what he was doing was insane. I think he had a 60-point triple-double, or I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I think he's had a 60-point triple-double. I think
yeah.
Or he has the highest scoring triple-double. It may have been like 58, 59.
Yeah, so the standards he had, from Houston, they're huge. So you try to translate to that when he went to Brooklyn and now in Philadelphia. If you're expecting him to do the same things, he's just I don't know if he's going to be able to ever get back to that point. So obviously you have to change it up a bit and figure out, okay, we don't have that Harden anymore. We have a new Harden. How do we build around this Harden? And I still think he's an excellent passer, and he's still a good isolation scorer, just not as efficient as what he used to be. I think that's the only difference. His efficiency, I believe, has dropped. So with that being said, I think the acquisition of PJ Tucker is actually huge. PJ Tucker, I think, is one of the best defenders in the NBA. I don't think you have to be considered a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, or or nominee or whatever, to be good at defense, because there's more to defense than just steals and blocks and all that good stuff. PJ Tucker in itself is a defensive leader. He takes on the number one guys, and he's shown he can hold his own against all of them. So I think he was a great pickup. Obviously, my biggest concern is Joel Embiid, and if he's going to be able to stay healthy. And I think that's almost every team's concern, but for me, especially Joel Embiid. He's such a big guy, and for the most part, he the way that Joel Embiid works is, if he gets bodied up too much, or not bodied up, but he just one wrong twist, and it's over. And past couple seasons, ever since Joel Embiid's been there, they haven't made it past the second round. And I think it's really dependent on him. Even when they lost against the Raptors versus in that insane Kawhi buzzer, um, I think that was probably one of the best teams he's been on. Um, but can it work? Yeah, I love Tyrese Maxey. Um, I actually like Tobias Harris a lot. I just don't think he should have the ball in his hands too much as he does. But he's not bad. Maybe his contract is bad, but he's a good player. So if they just develop the system to where they're not trying to make it Houston Harden and they're making it based off current Harden, I think it definitely worked. I think they have the right bench unit. The you know defenders. They got 3-point shooters. They pretty much have a good mix of everything with a pretty solid coach. And so as long as they can base it off today, then yeah, they could do it.
Yeah, I think bringing up Houston Harden, he's not the same guy that he was, and even like the last couple of years when he was even in Houston, it wasn't the same as when he first started, because I mean that takes a toll on your body. Every possession, being the guy, having to do everything, it hurts. It hurts to watch because of how tiring it looks. And you brought up his passing. I swear, when he came into the Sixers, it was like 15 assists in a row, like every game. Every time I was watching, it was just like assist, 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 assist. And now Embiid finally has the thing that they've been needing: a spot-up shooter. PJ Tucker is the best corner three-point shooter in the NBA, like statistically. Why is that? I don't know. But he shoots like 50% from the corner. Embiid now has a guy that he can kick to. Harden can drive and he can kick to him. It is a legitimate threat to the defense. And you have to keep another guy out on PJ Tucker at all times because he's going to knock it down. That leaves less double teams on Harden, less double teams on Embiid, less double teams on Tobias Harris, even less double teams on Maxey. You've got 4 scorers that can score in isolation, and all of them can shoot the 3 on a kick, and then you also have PJ Tucker who can shoot on the kick. Embiid's a great defender. Tucker, I would agree, he's one of the best defenders in the NBA. Definitely the most unsung defender in the NBA. I think this absolutely can work. I think it will work. It just comes down to, like, can they beat the Bucks? Because I think that's the one real test for them, because I think the Bucks are built in a similar way where everyone can kind of shoot. They've got a lot of isolation scores. That's the real question. Can they take down Giannis, Drew, and Chris Middleton? I think they could. I don't know if they necessarily will, but it's definitely going to be close. And I love Joel Embiid. He's probably my favorite player to watch in the NBA that's not on OKC. So I think it absolutely can work. And again, it all depends on health, just like every team. But Embiid, health has always been a nagging problem for him.
Yeah, no, 100%. And one thing that you mentioned was James Harden, the way that he dribbles so much and how he has the ball in his hands so much. I was actually reading up on something that was pretty interesting, where it may not seem like a lot, over time, but the less you dribble, it may seem obvious. The less you dribble, like the more energy you kind of save throughout the game. So if they can pretty much just stop relying on an ISO Harden only in times where he's actually needed to do that. I think that's a big factor, especially when you have to kick it out to guys like PJ Tucker or Tyrese Maxey. A lot of people don't think the way that I think, but I think when PJ Tucker left the Bucks, that was actually hurt the Bucks a lot more than people think. So I'm excited to see PJ lead this 76ers defense as much as he did for Miami Heat defense. So yeah, in going up against the Bucks, I think they got it, to be honest.
Yeah, and let's get into the final team. Don't know how long we'll go, but the Portland Trailblazers, they're tough. I live in Portland. It's so weird the way that they're going about things because they're keeping Damian Lillard, and keep your superstar. You got to generate that income, but the moves that they make, like consistently, are just kind of like, that's the guy you went after. Like you lose C.J. McCollum, and they're like, okay, we got Jeremy Grant, like, and Gary Payton. That's kind of the moves that they made. They obviously re-signed Anthony Simons. They drafted Shaden Sharp, but that was it. Those were the moves. Like, is this any different from any Portland Trailblazers team we've seen in the last 5 years, or is it just going to be the same? Yeah, they made the playoffs. Maybe they were a 6, 7, 8. Maybe they're in the play-in type of team led by Damian Lillard, where maybe he has a couple of big games in the playoffs, but they lose in 6, and it's like, okay, let's keep it going, do it again next year.
To be honest, I'm starting to think that with the way that Damian Lillard is playing, it's kind of almost the same way as how Bradley Beal is for the Wizards. It's like, do you continue to build around him? And, you stay competitive, but is that what you want? Like, is that all you want? And it kind of feels like Damian Lillard, and I don't really know if this is his fault. I think it's more on management to build the right players. You pretty much nailed it right on the head. They traded away C.J. McCollum, and their best player to replace him is Jeremy Grant. Like, that's an obvious downgrade. No one, you don't even have to think about that. So I think it's just another play-in tournament type roster, to be honest. Even though I like, Simons, I just don't. I don't think they have. I don't think they have enough the right roster in order to make it even past that. Especially in the West this year. The West, the Clippers are back. They're healthy. The Nuggets are back. They're healthy. The Pelicans got Zion back. They're the West is actually so unbelievably stacked, and I just don't see. I don't see them better than even a Dallas Mavericks team. There's not a lot of teams I would put them ahead of. So I don't think it would work. And I think Damian Lillard as a player should definitely just kick the loyalty can out there and just figure out a new place for him. And I don't think it's his fault. I think it's based off management and them giving him the right players.
Yeah, and what's so frustrating, is it's like management appears like they're trying, they're signing players that teams that are trying to contend sign, right? Gary Payton, tenacious defender, really gets after it. He can score the ball, played a key role for the Warriors up until that injury, and then I think he came back. He played a couple of finals games. You sign him, you sign a really good 3-and-D player in Jeremy Grant, and you're like, these are moves that you would expect a contender to be making that already has their second star. Now, I like Anthony Simons. I think he made a leap last year. But, that's the guy you're counting on with Damian Lillard, who maybe your best player in franchise history, at least probably since Bill Walton. That's the guy that you're like, okay. What is he, year 3, maybe year 4, Anthony Simons? I can look it up, but, he's played 3 years in the NBA. Actually, he's played 4. He came in 2019. I get the numbers mixed up. Came into 2019. He's played 4 years. He averaged 3, 8, 7, and then he averaged 17 last year. But, he was also, the only guy trying to score the ball last year for the Trailblazers. So it's just weird. It's frustrating. As an OKC fan, I was thankful when they traded Russell Westbrook because it showed that they weren't going to do the same thing over and over again. Yeah, they can try and get a second star and try and play with Russ and then, win a couple of games. They can try that. But it just kept not working. And they were like, you know what, Russ? Why don't you go be the number 2 somewhere? And he ended up going to Houston. Play with your buddy. And it was better for OKC. I think it would be better for Portland if they gave up on Dame. They have Shaden Sharp, who I really like. They have Anthony. They have young pieces. Trade Dame, get some picks, and try and rebuild. I think that's the only way that they can get through this. Being in, I call it perpetual mediocrity. It's what too many teams are in right now.
Yeah, no, I like it, and again, it just goes right back to Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal is going to keep the Washington Wizards, at a good standard to where they're going to win games, you know, maybe make playoffs. They haven't made playoffs in a few years, but because of how good he is and where he takes the Wizards, they're not going to get those high picks, that you would want as a rebuilding team. And I kind of view it the same way as Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard is going to keep you competitive. I mean, he has shown he can take the team to the playoffs. He'll get you there as far as he can, but you're not going to get any farther without an actual number 2 star. Everyone has a number 2 star in the championship roster. No one has done it by themselves. And are we really going to count on Anthony Simons to be his number 2? To me, it's unrealistic. And if they had a number 2 and all these roster moves were made after the fact, then I think we'd be talking a little different. But they don't. It's just another kind of what you said, perpetual mediocrity. That was pretty perfect. They're not going to get far by just keeping Damian Lillard, without an actual number 2.
Yeah. All right, Carlos. I mean, that's all the topics that we had today. I think it was a ton of fun. Hopefully anybody watching, listening, whatever they're doing, subscribe, follow the TikTok, follow the Instagram, all that stuff. Just America's Finest Sports. And I think AF Sports as well. Go check all that stuff out. Thank you so much, Carlos, for coming on. Do you have anything, to end off the show with? I'll let you end off the show. Anything final to say?
Yeah, you know what? This is actually a lot of fun. I love talking. I love talking basketball. And I'm excited for this show, and I hope it continues to do big things. But appreciate you having me on.
No problem. All right, let's wrap it up. It was a lot of fun, and I'll see all of you again next week. But there should be another episode on this channel coming out within the next